I'm not sure if you heard about this company called Vinfast. They're a Vietnamese automaker. They're starting to sell their cars, their EVs, in the US right now, specifically in California. So I think it's time that we take a look at this brand and see what's going on with these models that they have, both when it comes to spec and tech. And of course, we need to talk about this Pininfarina design that we have on these SUVs. So first of all, let's jump into this article from InsideEVs.com, written by Stephen Ewing. I really like how he's writing. It's very entertaining, so I suggest you go and check this out, the full article for yourself if you want to learn more about these cars. So let's see here. I've been driving the Vinfast VF8 for less than an hour when my inner ear sounded the alarm and politely, urgently requested I stop to get some fresh air. Okay, it doesn't start out very well with this test drive. This is just from 2 days ago. Here you can see some of the spec and tech. We can bring that up since it's right here in front of us. We have 402 horsepower and 456 pound-feet of torque from dual motors, 0 to 60 in about 5.5 seconds. The range, 191 miles on a full charge. Sounds pretty low to me if I was to buy an EV today, specifically for 56 grand that they want for this VF8. So the Vinfast VF8 is not a concept or pre-production vehicle. The company has already started customer deliveries here in the United States. And you can only get the VF8 City Edition, which has an 82 kilowatt hour battery pack and 2 electric motors. The base City Edition Eco offers a not insubstantial 349 horsepower and 369 pound-feet of torque, while the Plus, this is the one that he drove here in this article, has 402 horsepower and 457 pound-feet of torque. You get 207 miles of range for the Eco and 191 miles for the Plus, which we just looked at, and it feels like it's very low in comparison to other EVs in the same market. So the Italian design house Pininfarina is responsible for the VF8 styling. This SUV looks pretty good. I mean, I have a lot to say about this in just a second when we jump into Photoshop. But then when you get to the inside and things start to fall apart. The entire door panel flexes when you pull the handle from inside. Not great. And then you have the seats that are stiff as they are flat. Headroom and legroom are decent overall, but there are a hella cheap materials and inconsistent panel gaps everywhere. It's like early 2000s General Motors in here. That is not a good review for the interior if you have to compare it to early 2000s GM cars. Inside, you also have a 15.6-inch central touchscreen, which is Tesla-level lousy as far as user experience is concerned. To adjust the mirrors, this is a big problem. This is exactly the problem I have with screens. And it seems Vinfast just took this to a whole new level here. So to adjust the mirrors in the steering column, you have to use a combination. So you have to do like two things at once of a menu on the touchscreen and the physical volume track controls on the steering wheel, which sounds pretty ridiculous to me. And you need to be sure to hit the exact middle of each icon or the system won't budge. Response times are slow, swipes are laggy, and God help you if you need to rely on the natural language voice functionality. So he tried this out and he said, hey, Vinfast, what's the weather like in San Diego? Which seems to be a pretty easy question. And then the car even displayed those words on the screen, so it definitely hear what he said, but then told him that the car couldn't understand the request. Pretty weird, but you do have wireless Apple CarPlay and Android Auto as standards. At least that's a positive when it comes to the tech here. The backup camera refresh rate is abysmal and the feed is super low res. The head-up display washes out if you're wearing polarized sunglasses. The one tap 3 blink turn signal function didn't always work, and that's a problem I've actually had in my Tesla Model 3 as well. If I tap it sometimes, the indicator doesn't come on at all, which is very weird, and that happened after a couple of updates back, maybe 6 months or so. The climate control has a digital temperature gauge, but in practice it only has 2 settings: freezing or surface of the sun. You can program all sorts of drive settings and driver assistant preferences, but the moment you step out of the vehicle, everything resets, so you have to do this every single time you go into the vehicle. And keep in mind that this is not a pre-production vehicle. This is actually the car that is in production and being sold to customers now. Crap suspension damping, steering response is non-linear and inconsistent, and the car also pulled to the right on flat surfaces, so that's fun. You have 2 levels of regen braking, but even the highest setting isn't strong enough to allow for one-pedal driving. I think that's one of the big benefits of having EVs. You can do one-pedal driving, but what's the point if you have the highest setting and it doesn't brake enough to allow you to do that? The nicely equipped City Edition Plus costs $57,200. In comparison to a fully loaded Hyundai Ioniq 5 Limited all-wheel drive that costs $57,835, you can kind of see where this is starting to be a problem here for Vinfast. And as he says, there's no way in hell would I ever recommend the VF8 over an Ioniq 5, let alone any other EV. So, as you can see, they do have a bit of work to do, Vinfast, if they really want to be competitive, not just when it comes to the range, but also when it comes to the quality and the tech inside. The design, though, let's talk about this design. So we have 2 models here with the Vinfast that's going to be sold in the US. You have the VF8 that's on sale right now. Then you have the larger VF9, which is going to cost around $83,000 when it goes on sale, and hopefully by then, for that price, they will have sorted out these issues that they're having right now. I really hope they do. But let's have a look at the VF8 here, for example. What I like overall, let's just have a look quickly at both of these side by side. What I like about Vinfast right here is that it is designed by Pininfarina, so they know what they're doing when it comes to design, and that you can definitely see that when I look at these designs, because as we talked about before, when you have a lineup of cars, you have the small, middle size, and then the big size cars. The smaller size should always be a little bit more funky, a bit more stylized. Then when you come out to the big SUVs and the big sedans and the big brothers of the lineup, you want to have them be a little bit more restrained. And I think they're doing a great job here while still having a pretty decent identity for a brand new company like Vinfast is. I'm not sure how long they've been around in Vietnam, but they're brand new here in the US. So have a look at this integration of the LEDs. I really like the design here because it has some dynamic movements to it. We have a thinner light right here in the daytime running light, and then you have the headlight being integrated sort of in the bumper. I would call this a bumper headlight, but we do have some very cool shapes to this LED. And it wraps around the center logo in the middle. We have all these lines then pointing towards this center. I think it's a pretty cool design. I wouldn't call it beautiful, but I would call it strong identity in this design. You also have this nice chamfer underneath the headlight, housing it and giving it a nice foundation. Looks like we have some probably functional air vents that goes through the front fender, and we have a cooling intake down here at the very bottom with the fog lights at the very low part of the front end. The wheels, these are 20-inch wheels. I think they look pretty decent as well. So the front end kind of reminds me a little bit of the Renault Megane when I look at the positioning of this, and specifically with this dip here that we have in the middle. Looking at it from a side view, same thing here. I think it maybe loses a little bit of its identity when we look at the side like this. It looks pretty generic, but I still think it looks a lot better or has a lot more character to it than, for example, a Tesla. Any Tesla, the X, Y, or the 3, because we have some cool line flow in here, and it doesn't necessarily look like an EV, because look at the positioning of the A-pillar here. If we go down with the A-pillar, it goes almost straight into the center of the wheel. Since it is an SUV, it's gonna miss it by a bit of a distance right here. But it looks like it could house an internal combustion engine underneath here because of these proportions. And then we have this line that goes upwards instead of down like we have on most cars. In most cars, this line, instead of going upwards like this towards the front, usually what happens is it goes in this direction. So it goes into the bumper in the back. And this line at the bottom reminds me a bit of the Nissan Z line, which has the same kind of upward angle line. Maybe that's a trend that's coming now, who knows. Up top, we have the roof line with the integrated roof spoiler here, sending this off in a decent way. Pretty sporty design with this angle at the rear as well. And you can see better the 20-inch wheels. how they suit this overall proportions of this car. Looking at the rear, what I like here again, we have a very clear connection in the rear graphics to the front. We have the same kind of LEDs dipping down and then kind of hugs the center logo in the middle, and still have some dynamics in this. So we have a thicker piece of the LED at the very end right here, then it goes into a thinner piece, and then even thinner as closer we get to this logo in the middle. I think it's a pretty decent design, and it definitely looks like it's been designed by a company or a brand, a design house that knows what they're doing. They've been designing cars for a very long time, Pininfarina, so they definitely know how to create a decent looking SUV for a brand new company. Looking at the interior here, before we jump in and have a look at the VF9, the big brother, they say, the reviews I've read the past couple of days say that this interior it feels very low quality. But when I look at it just from a visual reference, it looks pretty decent to me. I mean, this is what EVs are today. You have a big screen in the middle, and you have some air vents at the bottom. Thankfully, these are physical air vents. You can actually see them and adjust them manually. What I don't like, as you know, is that we have to go into the software to adjust some basic settings, such as the climate control and so on. But other than that, the coloring, the design in the middle, this dip in the middle still has some connection to this dip that we have in the front and the rear. So the exterior design flows very well into the interior design. And then we have some physical buttons for the drive, neutral, reverse, and park, which I think looks way more interesting than a very stripped down, sterile Tesla interior. I would definitely prefer to have this type of interior. They just need to work on the, on the driving experience for these cars based on what I've read the past couple of days. So let's have a look at the VF9 here. And this is what I'm talking about. Have a look at this car, and then we have the big brother being a little bit more restrained, a little bit more serious, relaxed, and stately when it comes to proportions. For example, we have it all over this car. We have the same feeling of the LEDs in the front end with this dip around the front logo, but they're now a bit less dynamic and more static, which is exactly what you want. Same thing with this intake here. Look at how stylized it is on the VF8. You have a lot of chamfers, a lot of angles going on here, but then when you grow up, when you go into the bigger ones, you want to have it be more vertical, horizontal, exactly like we have in the VF9 compared to the VF8. Also, another detail are these fenders that we have around the wheel, both front and rear. Looking at the VF8, it's very smooth, organic almost, but here it becomes way more static and just feels a little bit more stately than the VF8. And I think the best view to see this change is from a side view. So look at the VF9 here and just how boxy this is. For example, this angle in the rear, way less slope than we have in the VF8. Same thing with the lower part, very static, and the shoulder line goes almost straight from the very end point to the front. And I like this treatment of the C-pillar right here. This brings in the grille design and the design that we have in the rear into even the side view. So it's a very nice touch to see the same kind of graphic elements and styling going from the front even to the side, and then of course coming back down here in the rear end. Again, I think I do like these wheels. They look good. They don't look, super sporty or fantastic, but for an EV like this, I think this is a good. They're doing some really cool wheel designs for the Vinfast cars, and you can also see the fenders here being a lot more static than we have in the VF8, and also this corner up here of the A-pillar going into the roof, almost a sharp angle up here, while in the VF8 still being more organic, more funky, a little bit more energetic in its design, being the smaller sibling, having a very organic looking roofline. Looking at the rear end, same kind of design or styling that we have in the VF8, but again, it's a lot less dynamic and more static. We don't have, for example, different thicknesses of this LED in the end point. It's still the same thickness from the very start point right here into the center, which then again houses the logo in a very beautiful way, and a lot more horizontal lines that don't have unnecessary angles to them or something like that. Very cool approach by Vinfast to invest in great design to begin with. I think that's the way to go and create a strong brand identity for the brand from the very first model. So looking at the interiors, it feels pretty similar to the VF8. However, instead of having the dip up here, we now have it more visible. The same dip that we have around the rear logo and the same dip that we have LEDs going around the front logo now comes in to the interior as well with this ambient lighting that you can see. And again, I think this is a good looking interior for what it is. Do I want to have a gauge cluster here with the essential information? Yes, I would, but that's not what we get in EVs these days. Usually we have just a big screen like we have in these two models right here. We do have still though some physical adjustments for the vents and the same kind of buttons that we have in the VF8 and some volume controls down here. The interiors look great, but unfortunately it seems like the quality is just not there yet. But I think VinFast is, they're onto something here specifically when it comes to the design. I think it's an interesting design for what it is, EVs, and they also have a very strong brand identity from the start. Now I really hope that they work a lot more on the driving experience and figuring out how to make the tech work, and they could be a serious competitor to what's already on the market today.